I now want to tell you about me personally and what brought me to Queens and why I love Queens so much. My parents were immigrants. I was an immigrant. I wasn't born in this country. My father was a machine operator with a 6th grade education. He stopped going to school when he was first in India, and then when partition happened, he moved over to Faisalabad in Lahore, and he had to stop going to school because he had to support his family and work. So when he came to this country, he was a machine operator. My mother was a registered nurse, and she managed to get a job here in this country, the land of opportunity, the land of freedom, right? And came over with nothing on their backs, except me as a baby and a suitcase with some clothes. They found a basement apartment in Corona, Queens, where they lived in this place with bars on the window in Corona, 2 windows in the back of the apartment, and we lived there for a number of years until my parents had enough money to save to buy their own home in Elmhurst on Junction Boulevard, which is where my mother still lives today. Unfortunately, my father passed away in 2012 unexpectedly, and I wasn't able to see him when he passed away, and he's buried in Faisalabad. But I tell you this story because America is a land of opportunity, and it's a land where we can realize our dreams, and that's why my parents came here. When I was growing up in Queens in the 80s and the 90s, I looked around my neighborhood, and I did not see people who looked like me in law enforcement. I did not see people who looked like my husband in law enforcement. My husband is African American and Native American, and we have 2 sons. One is at West Point studying and learning to be an officer in the US Army, and the other one is at New York University. I didn't see people who looked like my friends in Elmhurst, right? It was a very diverse community. We had Latino people, Hispanic people, people from Asia, South Asia, all over. And in the police that I saw in the community, I didn't see the prosecutors, and I didn't see it in the people who make policy decisions every day. And so I decided to do something about it, and I decided to go to school, get an education, become a lawyer, because I wanted to change the criminal justice system and work in it, and so that it would be more representative of the communities in Queens. And that's exactly what I did. My first job was at the DC Public Defender Service, where I spent countless numbers of hours investigating cases for poor people who could not afford to pay for their own attorney. After that, I went to law school, and I came back to Queens and served this very county for 15 years as a special victims prosecutor, one that did child homicide cases, child physical sexual abuse, adult sex crimes, human trafficking cases, and crimes against our senior citizens. All the easy cases. Nobody wanted to do them, and that's why I wanted to do them, because I wanted to stand up for victims and give a voice to the voiceless in our society. As Mr. Najmi said, I was tapped by Ken Thompson to be his special counsel. And I went with him to Brooklyn. I worked and built a conviction review unit with him and worked on a marijuana policy so that Black and brown young people wouldn't be saddled with a criminal conviction that would affect them for the rest of their lives. And we decided we weren't going to prosecute low-level marijuana possession offenses. The mayor tapped me afterwards to head up the Civilian Complaint Review Board here in New York City, which oversees 35,000 police officers in New York City. So I not only worked alongside police officers, I also held them accountable when they did wrong things to people. While I was executive director there, the Eric Garner case was investigated and substantiated. Thabo Cephalosha, the basketball player, that case was investigated and substantiated against the police officer. And tennis pro James Blake, that case was investigated and substantiated against the police officer. Because I believe that we have to hold people accountable. We have to be fair and just, but we have to hold people accountable, all people accountable, no matter whether they're a police officer, whether they're a judge, whether they're a politician, whether there's someone in the street who harms somebody in our community. And that's what I stand for. My most recent stint was at Harvard Law School. I still teach there to the wonderful young people who are looking to become attorneys and who want to do litigation and trial work. But my most recent stint was working with the amazing Attorney General, Karl Racine, in Washington, D.C. And maybe you've heard about him in the news. He is constantly holding Mr. Trump accountable for what he's doing in the White House. And there I initiated reforms also so that young people can stay out of jail. Anti-truancy initiatives to break the school-to-prison pipeline so that less young people end up with a criminal conviction or end up in the juvenile justice system and don't end up spending time in jail or prison. So that's what I've done. For over 20 years, I have dedicated my entire life to criminal justice and to making sure that our justice system holds people accountable, represents victims, but is fair and just for everyone, not just the select few. And that's why I've decided to run for Queens District Attorney today, because I feel that as an immigrant, as a woman, as a person of color, as the mother of 2 Black sons, as the face of Queens, I need to change the face of the criminal justice system in this county for the better.